Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first video edition of Crossing the Touchline here at Massive Report. Ty Fisher alongside Columbus Crew legend and MLS Season Pass analyst Brian Dunseth. Dunny, how are you?
I'm fantastic, man. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for doing this. Um, Big matchup this weekend.
Mm.
Columbus Crew, San Diego FC, newly minted MLS expansion side. The battle of the unbeatens, right? I guess the first thing first, talking about San Diego, is what has them clicking right now? What is Mikey Varas doing that is making San Diego be so powerful?
Yeah, I asked them the same question because they are on their 8th week together. And when you put that into context for the start of the season, it's pretty incredible. I met Mikey back when he was the interim head coach for the U.S. men's national team during the September window for those games against Canada and New Zealand. And while the results didn't go the way I think anybody was really hoping for in that kind of weird timeline of Mauricio Pochettino being announced, I realized there was a couple non-negotiables. And for him, it was quality of human being, the application of the non-negotiables in the training sessions, and then ultimately the philosophical side of how he wanted to play his version of soccer, his version of football. I think he and Tyler Heaps have done a phenomenal job on the early phase of this roster building. I don't think there's anything to suggest there may be anything different than the debut season of St. Louis City SC, which really surprised all of us by taking the Western Conference before kind of falling apart at the very end of the season. I think they've done a phenomenal job, and they've hit so far on their foreign players. I think with the mixture of the return of Luca de la Torre and finding players like McVeigh or Jasper Loffelson or Anibal Godoy, who's been really the metronome for this team in the build-out and transition moments. Anders Dreyer, 3 goals in his first 3 matches. He is incredibly active. He should have had 2 more against Real Salt Lake. And outside of maybe the disappointment of 2 weeks ago against St. Louis City at home and the 0-0 draw, where I felt like they deserved more from that game, I think what was impressive this last weekend in Salt Lake was that they're without Chucky Lozano. They go down a goal early. And I was saying on air with my partner for the day, because Max was hosting MLS 360, I was saying to DJ, well, now we'll truly get to understand kind of like the psyche of a team when they go down. They've given up their first goal of the season. Like, how are they going to respond? So I would say so far, the litmus test, it's tough to say that San Diego's failed in any aspect so far. And I think both Tyler and Mikey understand that there's going to be significant highs and significant lows in Major League Soccer over the course of a regular season. But so far, so good. They've been really, really impressive.
One thing that I do know, former reentry draft, now LAFC winger Yao Yaboa was part of the Right to Dream Academy. And that's something that San Diego FC, it seems like they pride themselves on, is the Right to Dream Academy.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what the Right to Dream Academy is, what is it and how has San Diego been able to utilize it the best of their advantage?
Yeah, I wish I could be more cognizant and sharp with my definition of right to dream, but the relationship in the academy format of giving those less fortunate the opportunity to potentially fulfill from an identification standpoint early in their playing careers, the chance, whether that's domestic or abroad, whether that's professional, or even it's the avenue which we're seeing more and more in the collegiate soccer game here in the United States, which I still think for some clubs, it's wild to completely divest of the idea of these hardened, pathless traveled, really, like, let's use Emeka Eneli as maybe the perfect example.
Yeah.
Columbus Crew Academy coming through, understanding what it's like, Aiden Morris-esque, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. He ends up going to college, going to Cornell, playing 4 years, and then all of a sudden it's like the maturity angle, the education angle, and that hunger and desire turns into something different, where now he's captain of Real Salt Lake and he's already got 2 caps with the U.S. men's national team. The path less traveled is the most interesting one for me, because I don't think there's like just a streamline, A, B, and C equals D, E, and F when it comes to being a professional soccer player. So Right to Dream for a long, long time has had proof and concept with what they're trying to build, what they expect. And I think as important as it on the field for these opportunities, as important is off the field for creating some fine young gentlemen that recognize that, unfortunately, Father Time is undefeated, and setting them up for not only maybe on the playing side, but more importantly, off the field. Then you throw in the Danish connection. You throw in the pipeline of Tyler Heaps and what he's done in a short amount of time. The guy's 33 years of age, and as a sporting director, general manager, whatever the title is, because each club kind of has its own designation. What's incredible is his timeline with U.S. Soccer, his timeline at Monaco, and then coming over here to the United States. So it's really this weird force of kind of young talent, whether that be from the coach or behind the scenes. You throw in Tom Penn, you throw in the extraordinary wealth of this ownership group, and all of a sudden, I don't see why they can't. And by the way, the interest, right? I mean, it's San Diego.
Yeah.
The easiest job in the world is to be a weather guy in San Diego. 72 and sunny today on a Thursday afternoon. And so, like whether it's Mo Salah or it's Chucky Lozano or it's Kevin De Bruyne or it's Sergio Ramos, there's been a lot of names associated with San Diego. And I think they're just in the beginning. They're just in the forefront. And I think what we've seen from LAFC, what we've seen from Atlanta, certainly what we're seeing at Inter Miami, when you have ownership groups with deep pockets and we see kind of expansion slowing down, I think more and more of these multi-billion-dollar owners are going to recognize that there's a lot of ways to be successful in Major League Soccer. You just have to have the right people in charge, and you have to trust them to make the good decisions.
Switching gears now, Columbus really started off kind of slow, I would say, the season against the Chicago Fire because they're missing. Well, not even missing, because they sold Cucho Hernandez, Christian Ramirez. Jason Russell-Rowe, Diego Rossi have only gotten the goals for Columbus Crew so far this season.
Yeah.
Who needs to step up? In times like this, especially against a very good unbeaten side in San Diego, who do you feel like needs to step up?
I think there's layers to the conversation because I think it's unfair just to, and this is me coming from a former player standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Like when I played for Columbus, whether it was Jeff Cunningham or Edson Buttle or was Brian McBride or Brian Mazonoff or Mike Clark or Kyle Martino or like Duncan Outen, Johnny Bush, Tommy Prestis, like I had all these guys around me and they were all leaders. I mean, Brian McBride was like our ultimate leader, right? He was like the shining light, not only because of the experience, but the way that he protected us all and led by example on a daily basis. But I don't think I could ever go public in a situation where it's like, man, we really need Brian McBride to step up. Like I think that would be really unfair. What I would say is that similar to maybe what LA Galaxy are dealing with, similar to, and by the way, let's pause and roll back the clock 12 months ago. Coming off the backside of losing an MLS Cup final in Columbus, which was an extraordinary night at Lower.com Field, and so happy for Dr. Pete Edwards and Dante Washington and everyone involved. To then fast forward to the January start, LAFC was missing 5 starters on that roster, and then 2 more subs. So my math isn't great from Cal State Fullerton, pass or fail, but that's 7 guys at the start of the season. Like that's really difficult, and we're seeing LA Galaxy deal with that right now. So I think Columbus is in a very fascinating timeline, right? When you think about these last couple of years, the transitions from like a Lucas Zelleran to an Aiden Morris to a Rossi coming in to a departure of Cucho to just even a Yaya Boa, like all these like pieces, things that happen, Sands tearing his ACL that leads to Amundsen coming in, like Bez leaving and Issa Tall taking over. Like for as much as we look at Columbus from the outside looking in as a favorite in the Eastern Conference and kind of this steady force of the team that you don't want to play against, they've had some significant change. And I think that Wilfred Nancy and ownership have done a phenomenal job in these transition moments, because the reality is I think every club has a 5-year plan. Every club has a 3-year plan. And then every club has a 1-year to 6-month plan because they got punched in the face because all of a sudden, and this is true for any of the clubs in major, like we're in a world sport. Like this isn't just MLS. So the interest when someone knocks on the door and says, hey, I can provide you Europa League action, I can put you in La Liga, I can put you in touching distance of qualifying for Europe, and here's a couple of the different players that you're going to be a part of at Betis, that's going to be difficult from the ambition of the player, the ambition of the club, the ambition of the representation. So right now, long story short, I would say collectively, I don't think much has changed for Wilfred Nancy outside of the names, the names and the faces on the back of the jerseys. But I would say that the idea, while similar, is going to be applied differently. And that means on nights where you go to LAFC and you have a couple of chances and defensively those minuscule moments turn against you, you lose 3-0, then what's going to be the response? I thought they should have gotten more out of the Houston game.
Yeah.
I thought that the performance against LAFC, if they get that third goal, all of a sudden everything changes. It looks a little bit more awkward because Denny gets the transition goal late in the match. But there's a lot of good pieces. And I think in the application and the attacking phase of play, while they're still trying to figure that out, to me, I still see the same style, the identity, the same. I don't want to call it swagger because that's more arrogance than confidence, but the same confidence, the same idea of how they're trying to play game in, game out.
Yeah. Um, for Columbus, I've noticed some similarities between the style of play with San Diego and Columbus, right? Columbus prides themselves with that three-man center back.
Hmm.
Despite it doing out of different formations and whatnot, what similarities have you seen while watching a little bit of San Diego and Columbus that can be a very intriguing piece heading into Saturday?
Width. It's going to be a battle of width. And as much as we talk about the battle in the midfield, and obviously, Rossi, Nagby, AZ, if he's in, um, just thinking down the line,
Hmm.
Arsenal on the left hand side, Farsi on the right hand side. The concern that I would think about if I was facing San Diego is a couple things. Number one, in their build out, Jesper Loffelson is the right back, but he's effectively a right winger. I mean, he is as high and as wide as possible.
Yeah.
Center backs kind of drop. The number 6 captain, Sherskoff, will kind of dip in between, and he'll sit and kind of protect. But as they build up, it's kind of interesting because Negri doesn't get forward that often, and he had that great scorpion header against Real Salt Lake. He's kind of like the last one you'd have on your bingo card for scoring goals.
Yeah.
Godoy is going to kick, scratch, punch, fight. Like he's got every trick in the book with the experience at his. What is he? He's 35 years of age, almost 150 appearances for Panama. And while he might go down as one of the more disliked players in the league, you love having him on your team, right?
Yes.
It's like the Mike Clark days back in the day for Columbus. Like
Oh
the guy
yeah.
who played everyone, and you're just like, you're such a jerk. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, he's my jerk. Like I love him. Like it's
Yeah.
great.
Of
Go
course.
kick Carlos Ruiz a few more times. Uh, but so the captain 6, Scherskoff, I think is really important. His relationship with Anibal Godoy. Luca De La Torre will sit in that pocket on the left hand side. It'll be interesting to see who continues to play for Chucky Lozano. We were told that it's 2 to 3 weeks, so hopefully he's back sooner rather than later. But that's good timing for Columbus to be without Chucky Lozano because his history is Mexican international at Napoli, at PSV. Like he can do some special things.
Oh yeah.
They put Ingvartsen, who was the starting number 9. He scored late in the game. They put him on the left hand side, and they put Juan Pablo Angel's son, Tomas Angel, as the point striker. And they looked really active. They could have had a couple goals early in the match, but when they made the change and Emma Boateng came on that left hand side, and then Ingvartsen went up top, Dreyer on the right hand side, looked a little bit different. So what they look like in the beginning of a match versus what they look like from hour mark 60 on to the end of the final whistle, they kind of had two teams. And by the way, 2 kids, Juan Pablo Angel's son, Tomas Angel, and Simo Valakari, with his son, Valakari, he played at FC Dallas. So you've got 2 kids playing in this team, which I thought was former MLS players, which was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
But I think if Columbus with the high press can initiate and try to knock down the simple buildup of San Diego, that'll be, I think, that and the midfield battle, that midfield third, who can win the crunching tackles, who can set the tone, and most importantly, not just challenge for the first ball, but winning that second ball to recycle possession and maybe take a breather off your legs, I think are important because San Diego's, again, cockiness, and I use that loosely,
Hmm.
in possession right now, they actually want to play on the road. They want to play teams straight up. They don't like when teams bunker down and sit and protect. And I don't think that's necessarily in the DNA of Wilfred Nancy and Columbus.
Yeah. Last one. MLS expansion teams have had mixed success. I kind of see San Diego's kind of reminiscent of when St. Louis
Yeah.
join the league, right? Um, where does their start rank compared to previous expansion sides?
Well, I think historically we've all seen the way that FC Cincinnati came into Major League Soccer
Yep.
and decided that is not the way. Because it wasn't until they identified Chris Albright and Pat Noonan coming over from Philadelphia, who
Hmm.
had that integral understanding of what Major League Soccer was like, um, for them to get back on track. I think, to your point, uh, Lutz and at the time Bradley Parnell did an extraordinary job building that roster, but
Yeah.
they signed 3 designated players, and they got them all in market before 6 months before the season even started. So kids were happy, wife had a house, everything settled in the community, and that takes time. And maybe a little bit differently, right? Because you're trying to convince everybody to go to St. Louis or Cincinnati or Columbus, like
Hmm.
you have Kansas City. You have to, those smaller cities. You have to convince people like this is the right reason for you to play your football, play your soccer with this
Correct.
club. So they did an extraordinary job. The leg up for San Diego is it's San Diego, right? So
Yeah.
again, I think so far it's hard for me because we do the preseason rankings and everyone's like, I got receipts, bro. Like you didn't have me as a playoff team. Yeah, dude, shut up. Like we did these back in February before the season even started, and you added 4 designated players. Like, how was I ever supposed to know it?
Yeah.
Um, so far so good. But again, both Tyler and Mikey have told me face to face that we understand life is going to get really, really difficult. And after this game against Columbus, they're away at Austin and they're home against LAFC. And these are moments where you'll get, like a better understanding of travel expectations, recovery, recuperation, and then kind of preparation from upcoming opponents. And for Mikey, this litmus test of he's a young manager, and he's very, very open and transparent that he's going to make mistakes. But in the short term, recognizing how does he utilize the experience from Sac Republic to FC Dallas Academy to FC Dallas assistant coach to US under 20 head coach to full team coach for that interim, and use all that experience to kind of put this team together. I think they're far off. I mean, they've got over $4 million in general allocation money sitting there. I mean, in context, LA Galaxy 0. And maybe it's not even 0. Like, that's how bad it is right now
Yeah.
for everyone. I mean, the Sean Davis debacle and signing him and then having to buy him out, because they're that far off. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of good things. Ranking them right now, I would say there's no reason to suggest that they can't think that what St. Louis City SC did, in their debut season, that they can't replicate that, which means not a lot of losses, a lot of draws. So how do you turn losses into draws, draws into wins? I think that was one of the most impressive things about St. Louis in their inaugural year.
Brian, thank you so much for doing this. Again, crossing the touchline we normally do with like other reporters, but I feel like this was probably the best time for our first video crossing the touchline.
I appreciate it.
So appreciate you hopping on. Are you calling the match Saturday?
Yeah, yeah. So Tio Max, I call him Uncle Max. Tio Max and I are heading down to Snapdragon Stadium. We are heading over Friday evening, so super excited. And as always, every time I'm fortunate enough to be a part of a Columbus game, it always holds a special place in my heart. Obviously, because of my time with the city and my time with the fans. So can't wait to get back to Lower.com Field and check out one of the most magnificent stadiums in Major League Soccer.
Uh, Thank you again, Brian. That's
Yes.
all the time we have today. Be sure to check out our preview series of Crossing the Touchline, now turn to video. Thank you guys for tuning in and catch you guys next time.